OxyContin is a drug used to ease severe pain. The Pharmaceutical Association says in the past year, usage has doubled in this province.
Opioid addiction is on the rise on PEI.
Among young people, 1 out of every 8 deaths was related to opioid overdoses.
Every 19 minutes, someone dies from an accidental drug overdose.
You've heard the headlines. The opioid crisis has been growing at a terrifying rate in North America. Last year in Canada, there were nearly 4,000 apparent opioid-related deaths, and Canadians are desperate for answers. More and more, people are starting to look to the courts, to suing drug companies, and possibly even criminally charging pharmaceutical executives. The issue became more acute last week when it was announced there have been so many overdoses, they've had an effect on how long people are expected to live. After years of life expectancy rates getting longer, they're now dropping in BC. The United States has been rocked by the opioid crisis as well.
We are going to at least make an extremely big dent in this terrible, terrible problem.
So now President Trump, he's just signed a bill that would fund addiction treatment, try to prevent overprescribing, and to intercept more shipments looking for drugs like fentanyl. And here there's been more than 900 lawsuits filed in the U.S. One of the companies targeted is Purdue Pharma, the company responsible for OxyContin. Purdue's U.S. execs even faced criminal charges for misbranding the drug. And in 2007, the company and 3 top officials paid over $600 million in fines. Canada's turning to the courts now, too. There are numerous civil suits and calls for a criminal investigation. Purdue denies any wrongdoing in Canada, previously saying that it has always marketed its products in compliance with all relevant rules, regulations, and codes. British Columbia has now filed a class action lawsuit just this past August, alleging that pharmaceutical companies like Purdue intentionally misled the public about the safety of the opioids that they manufacture. The lawsuit also names retailers like Shoppers Drug Mart for their alleged role in the crisis. Joining us now is BC Attorney General David Eby. So, Mr. Eby, you've met with families going through this and told them that you will do absolutely everything that you can to try and resolve this opioid crisis. Is going to court the answer?
Well, for my office and for our government, it's for some level of accountability. I'm a firm believer, and our government believes firmly, that the justice system is for wrongdoing, not just of people who might be in the streets engaging in illegal conduct, but also for large companies. And through the civil system, we can ensure some level of accountability for these companies that we allege engaged in a very serious wrong that caused a lot of harm, not just in terms of healthcare costs, which is what this lawsuit is about, but to British Columbia families where doctors were induced through, we allege, misleading communications to prescribe drugs that they wouldn't have otherwise prescribed if they hadn't had this communication from the pharmaceutical company. And that caused a great deal of harm. And so we think that there should be accountability for that. That's why we're pursuing this route of the class action lawsuit.
Purdue Pharma there were criminal charges against Purdue Pharma in the United States. They admitted that its marketing of OxyContin was misleading, and yet there were no charges here in Canada. Purdue here has not acknowledged that there was any misleading advertising. What's the difference? Why is it so different in Canada?
Yeah, it's interesting, Wendy. The Purdue acknowledgement, their plea bargain essentially that took place in the United States, is a significant part of the pleadings or the documents that we're putting forward in our case to demonstrate that these companies knew exactly what they were doing. When the lawyers brought forward, in my office, brought forward this proposal that there was an opportunity for Canadian jurisdictions to sue the opioid companies, one of the key pieces of evidence that they brought forward to show that this was a problem here was to convince me that this was a good use of public resources, was the acknowledgement by this company that they willfully and knowingly promoted misleading information to physicians about addiction, about diversion, and these kinds of things. As Attorney General, I can initiate this type of class action, which British Columbia has done, and I can encourage other provinces to join us, but we have an independent prosecution service that evaluates things separately from my office. And I rely on them to do that, and I know they are alive to, if there is any evidence that comes out of the Canadian proceeding that indicates criminal wrongdoing, that they will be alive to the possibility and perhaps necessity of prosecution.
Well, we'll be watching to see where this goes. Mr. Eby, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me, Wendy.